Kirsty.
Hi, I'm Emma. So we're a practice for everyday life. Kirsty and I started out our graphic design partnership at the Royal College of Art, and since then, that was, well, almost 14 years ago. And since then, we're now a studio of 7 people. We're actually just based around the corner here in Bethnal Green in an old furniture workshop. And from there, we work with artists, curators, institutions, museums, companies the world over.
So up here, we've tried to condense the last 13 years into one slide. Just to give, for those of you who may not know us, a quick introduction of the type of projects we work on. But as we mentioned earlier in the introduction, we're going to focus on one of our projects, a really recent project that's just been published. The David Hockney exhibition catalogue for his show, his retrospective at the Tate Britain. We're going to quickly talk you through this, but with lots of stories and anecdotes along the way, because it was quite an entertaining collaboration between us, him, and the publisher.
Yeah, we were super excited to be invited to work on it by the Tate. We've been big fans of Hockney for years, actually, and we always wanted to do a book for him. So it was a dream project for us, really. My first encounter with Hockney's work was through a place called Salts Mill in Saltaire in West Yorkshire. I grew up in West Yorkshire, and Salts Mill had the biggest collection of Hockney's work. When Salts Mill first opened in 1853, it was the biggest factory in the world. And in Yorkshire, loads of people are still connected and work with the textile industry. In fact, my great-grandfather actually worked at Salts Mill as a dyer. And actually, most of my family were somehow in the cloth trade. So when Salts Mill closed down in the 80s, we all knew about it, really. I grew up in a little place called Blubberhouses. So there's some pictures of it here. It was a pretty remote part of the world, really. So when Salts Mill closed down, we all kind of, we heard that it was changing into a gallery, so we kind of drove across to visit it. 'Cause generally, we didn't really go to galleries. It was really my first experience of seeing contemporary art. The drawings, etchings, and paintings, and those sort of immersive photo collages of Hockney made a massive impression on me. The way he was doing these drawings, paintings, collages, and landscapes, it really inspired me to do drawing, printmaking, and collaging as well, and introduced me to, I guess, what the idea was of being a graphic artist, which is what Hockney saw himself as.
So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the publication specifically. One of the first things when we were talking about when we got commissioned is like, okay, like what's the feeling of this book? How is it going to present itself? And one of the most obvious things to us is his like charisma he's a beautiful man. He's got lots of energy, and there was so many portraits of him online. And actually, it was quite a task because at the time he was putting together this, as they call it, a sumo publication, enormous book. He was quite distracted with that in his studio. We were like begrudgingly giving us images, and we actually presented the whole first set of spreads with our own research online. We got a works list and just had to Google every image. And actually, it's funny because some of the portraits we used ended up being the ones that made it into the print. So it was quite a different way of putting together a first presentation to the Tate. And we also liked this idea of, because it was a retrospective, I think doing a retrospective as an artist is actually quite a tough task when you're alive, because it's sort of it's like going to your own funeral at the private view or something. But we really liked this idea that you go through the book, and we used, gradually when you see these portraits in the book, you see him aging and how he's just remained very kind of characterful and great.
Yeah, we used loads of these sort of full bleed images in the book. I mean, the images are fantastic materials to work with. And then this opens the softback version of the book, and we liked that this one, and then when you open the book, this first spread here, they both have these swimming pools, and one is really in the beginning, the time in California, and the next one is much more recent work, but they both have the same subject.
Actually, that work in particular, he was developing a series for the exhibition, so we didn't really know what that first work would be for a very long time. So we had this idea, and it was like hoping that something would, and it was just this really lovely circular moment.
So each chapter opener is like a close-up detail and really introduces that series. I guess the curators felt it was also really important to understand how Hockney painted and how his techniques changed over time. So each of these really sort of opened up. We really agreed that this was the best way to introduce the works, by sort of seeing these full and close up and really working with the scale. Yeah, so throughout the whole catalogue we worked with this scale, so trying to sort of represent the biggest paintings were the things that we created at large format, and the smaller drawings were smaller, but obviously there was such a difference in size that was quite difficult to realise, but I think we kind of got there.
Yeah, actually, we've been trying to do that for years for an artist, but generally artists do work at extreme scales, but Hockney somehow, he generally works quite large, except for his drawings, so we could apply this principle of scale throughout the book. And then typography, I mean, this is a sort of like, for those who have worked in publishing, it's one of the hardest tasks is to get a type-only cover out there, especially for a big blockbuster show like Hockney. So we knew that if we were using type in a way that it would have great importance. That we had to fight quite strongly. When you open the book up, we wanted this sort of presence of the opening chapters to be on their own and the type just singing to itself, rather than it being in juxtaposition of text and image, which there was so much to go in this book. It was a real fight, but we got there. And then the typefaces we used, one was Bureau Grot condensed or compressed, and Fact. What's nice about Bureau Grot condensed, it's actually a typeface that, sorry, next slide. It's actually based on a typeface that was developed by a foundry in the 1800s. And they're a foundry called Stevenson Blake, and they're based in Sheffield, and they're one of the biggest foundries celebrated in Britain and in England. And we really like this relationship that the county that David Hockney was born in was Yorkshire, and we were using a Yorkshire typeface. And it's actually got a very sweet history. Its original foundings was an engineer company, and then they opened later as a foundry, and it was the combination of a silversmith and a mechanic called William Garnett and a toolmaker called John Stevenson, and then it was financed by this guy called James Blake. We love this typeface, I'm sure you all do. It's quite well known, but and then, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the kind of this moment of being able to put it on the cover in that way was a real joy. We thought it's a classic thing, you present it thinking it would never get through, and then the curators just fell in love with it and just kept pushing it the whole way through. It is just on the hard copy, there's a softback copy as well, but that's it. Thank you.